Okay, we will start where we left off last time. Um, so we're still on the topic of agriculture. And last time we have talked about different types of soil. So there are sand soil, which is a type of soil characterized by the large particles. It has good, excellent drainage, and but it has poor nutrients and poor water retention. And it has a coarse texture, meaning like you can see here, the sandy soil is very, very rough. That is called a coarse texture. And next soil is the silt soil in the middle. And it is a type of fine soil that is made up of small particles of rocks and minerals. It is very fertile and its texture is known to be smooth and silky. So it's different from sand. Sand is very rough, but silt is very smooth and silky. The silt particles are smaller than the sand particles, but they're larger than what's called the clay particles, which are very, very small particles. So silt soil offers like a balance of water retention and drainage. And finally, we talked about the loamy soil. Well, before that, we talked about, well, the clay soil, which is the smallest um, particle-sized soil. But loamy soil, after that, is a balanced mixture of sand, silt, and clay. And it offers excellent drainage, aeration, and water and nutrient retention. So that is why loamy soil is the best soil for farming. And loamy soil also has abundant organic matter. Okay, that's what we did last time. Um, and yeah, we did compare briefly these three different types of particles. So sand has the largest particle up close. Silt has smaller particles, but it's larger than the clay particles. Clay particles are the smallest. They're very tightly packed together. So here's the particle size order. Clay is smallest, silt is in the middle, and sand is the largest. Okay. And we talked about aeration and water drainage. So here, what that means is that sandy soil, you can see there are larger pores in between particles. So large amount of air passes through those spaces. But on the other hand, if you look at the clay soil, there are smaller particles and there are small air spaces between them. And for water, it works similarly. Water, you can see, drains quickly in sandy soil. You can see water passes through because it has large air spaces. So water can go through all the large air spaces. But clay soil has tiny particles and small air spaces, and that results in water not quickly draining and results in high water holding capacity. So it absorbs water instead of letting it through. Okay, let's look at this question. Soils are described as heavy because they are what? You think? Yeah, why do you think they're heavy? Yeah, I'm hearing a few A's and I think I heard a B too. But the correct answer is A for this question. So if you look at clay soil, for example, clay soil is called a heavy soil. So heavy is a characteristic of soil. It's how you describe soil. And clay soil is an example of a heavy soil. And it's called a heavy soil because it is very dense, sticky, and drains slowly. So they have high water holding capacity. Remember that if you have smaller air spaces, then the soil has high water holding capacity. So clay does that. So for clay, the heavy soil, it is called heavy soil because they have a high water holding capacity. Okay, let's look at this next question. So let's look at the first one or the second one. Which of the following statements about clay soil is not true? Yeah, let's start with maybe listing some properties of clay soil. So, what properties of clay soil do you know? Clay is same as clay. It's the same thing. Yeah, if maybe you said C or D, um, but remember that clay soil, you have to read the options well because we need to choose what is not true about clay soil. So if you said maybe C, it's difficult to plow when dry, that would be correct, right? Um, so it is not the answer. It is difficult to plow when dry, so clay dries out really easily. That's one of the properties of clay soil. So it is not C. Yeah, let's look at B. It has high water retention. So that is also a correct property of clay soil. So we're looking for what is not true. Look at this. We're looking at what is not true. What is not true about it. So B is true. So look at ones that are like not true. So for this one, the answer would be A for this one. The first one. This one would be A because A says it swells when dry and shrinks when wet. But this is the opposite, right? So clay soil swells when it is wet. So if you have clay soil and add water to it, it swells. Add water. But if you let it dry, then it shrinks. It shrinks when you let it dry. So that is one of the properties of clay soil, and this is the opposite, right? So that is why the answer is A. 몇 번이지? Okay, yeah, let me go back to number 11 here, just as a review. So clay soil is important to know. So that's why I'm returning to this slide. So clay soil contains, remember, more than 30% of very small and tightly packed clay particles. Clay soil has a smooth, sticky texture when wet and becomes hard when dry. And remember, clay soils have high water holding capacity. So that is what is true about clay soil. Clay soils have high water holding capacity. While, it can be challenging to cultivate clay soil also has some benefits, including high nutrients and water retention, and ways to improve heavy clay soil. So, clay soil is might not be the best type of soil for farming. So, but it can be improved in different ways, like by adding organic matter, mulching, or breaking up compacted soil by tiling. So these are different methods of making improvements to heavy clay soil. And yeah, always remember these properties of clay soil. And yeah, I will share you the slide after as well so you can look at it. But let's move on to this last question about soil. So it says to state three physical properties of a soil. Um, and we've already covered this. Things like texture, color, structure, nutrient content, water holding capacity. All of these are examples of properties of soil. So, next question is soil texture is a term used to describe the what, do you think?
B,
Yeah.
B,
Did you say D maybe?
B.
Um, yeah, if you said C, then yeah, that's correct. If you said C. It's not the other options because the amount of water is not the soil texture. It's not related. Arrangement of soil particles. It's not really about the arrangement. But C, yeah, it is a property of a soil. Well, silt and clay is an example of a soil. That's, of course, it's a little broad, but it's definitely the case. And it is not a mixture of all soils. So soil texture is determined by proportions of three types of soil particles. Sand particles, texture is called coarse. Silt particle texture is called smooth and silky. And clay particles texture can be described as sticky when wet. It's also like smooth and sticky for the clay soil. Okay. Yeah, let's look at this next question about fertile soils. So, which of the following factors are used to describe a fertile soil? Which of these three options?
B.
Oh, yeah, if you said D, yeah, I heard D, and that is correct. Yeah, nice job. It's all one, two, and three. So all of these are factors that are used to describe a fertile soil. So if we look at texture, this part, most fertile soils are thick in texture. So that is one necessary property of a fertile soil. And if you look at color, color is also, I guess, a part of a factor. So darker color means a better fertile soil. And of course, the amount of organic matter is an important factor as well, because you need large amount of organic matter to have a lot of nutrients for the plants. So all of these three properties and factors are important when describing a fertile soil. So yeah, D is the correct answer. All of them. Okay, yeah. Let's look at this question. This is like a final wrap up question for this topic of soil. So can you identify each of the soil types labeled here? A, B, and C. Can you label them?
A is soil. B is sandy soil. D is layer soil.
Oh,
Layer.
yeah. Yeah, great job. You got them correct. So A is called what's called the loamy soil because it has a mix. It has a mix of organic matter. It has a mix of large particles. Always remember the loamy soil means a mixed soil. But yeah, you're right that B is also sand soil, the sandy soil. And C, yeah, it's a clay soil. You can see that because sandy soil has large particles and a lot of airspace. It is airspace. But clay soil has small airspaces and the particles are very small. Okay. And here is a table that summarizes the airspaces and particle sizes of these three different soils. So please take a look at this table. You can notice that for particle size, loamy soil is medium particle size, sand is large, clay is small for the particle size. For the air spaces, it follows the same. Loamy soil has moderate airspace, sand has large airspace, and clay has small airspaces. And finally, additional properties include loamy soils actually have the most and abundant organic matter. So when you're talking about organic matter, then you can see that loamy soil has the most organic matter around here. Okay, let's move on to this question. The third part, the third part. So state two ways of improving soil type B for vegetable cultivation. So So sandy soil was option B. So it's type B. And we know sandy soil drains water quickly, right? So how can we fix that? How can we improve sandy soil? Well, the goal is to increase water and nutrient retention. So we want sandy soil to hold water and nutrients better. And we can do that by adding organic matter and other materials. So step number one, you can add organic matter. So you can mix in compost or manure. That works great for sandy soil to improve nutrients. You can use mulch. Mulch also helps prevent moisture loss. So sandy soil has large particles and mulch fills up the gaps in between. So it prevents the moisture loss. So mulch is what is on top of the soil. So what you put on top of the soil, and it covers the sandy soil. So there will be less moisture evaporation. So it keeps the moisture in. That is how the mulch works. And number three, you can plant cover crops. It doesn't have to be mulch exactly, but you can use other cover crops like clover, ryegrass to improve the soil structure. So you can look at all of these other plants that are on the sandy soil. You can see that these grasses help improve soil structure. So next question is to state three reasons why sandy soil cannot support effective plant growth. And we've already talked about this, so we can go over it quickly. So it has poor water retention, poor nutrients, and poor soil structure. So that's why it's not good or effective for plant growth. That's why we're trying to address those issues, right? So yeah, let's look at this question, the sedimentation problem. So in an experiment to determine the various particle sizes of soil sedimentation, the particle above clay suspension are. So sedimentation, what it is, it's a heavy particle in a liquid that sinks to the bottom over time due to gravity. What is sedimented means what is gathered on the ground. So what is above clay? Can anyone see this? So here are components of clay. What is above that? Oh, yeah, if you said B, organic, yeah, that would actually be correct for this case because you can look at this here, can look at over this section, this part. That is the organic material. So after all the clay particles have been sedimented, means they've been brought down to the ground. Then what's left above floating are the organic materials. So the answer is B. Okay, let's move on to this part. So I'm going to describe and tell you some of the two important components of the soil that helps the crops to grow well. And those two important, any types of components you can put here are things like water, nutrient, living organisms. All of those are important components in the soil that helps the crops grow well. And second part, what helps to maintain good soil structure are the soil particles and also the same components that helps the crops grow well. Things like air, water, nutrient, living organisms, all of them also help to make good soil structure. So you can see an example on the right. This is a well-soiled, well-structured soil. So it has all the air, water, and nutrients evenly spread across. So that's why it has good structure, well structure. But the poor structured soil has smaller pores, um, or large pores. It's not even. So you can see here it has large pores, but over here it has small pores. And nutrients are not evenly spread. So that's why this is a bad and poorly structured soil on the right. Next question. Okay. It says to state two agricultural activities which make the soil lose its nutrients. What makes the soil lose its nutrients is we didn't talk about this, so that is why I'm giving you some examples now. So, soil can lose its nutrients by continuous cropping or overcropping the soil and burning of organic matter, like, starting a fire, burning the grass, the trees, excessive irrigation leading to leaching. So, irrigation just means maybe like a farm runoff that is nearby, meaning that when there is a farmland nearby the soil, the excessive irrigation can lead to leaching. And also regarding farming, excessive use of chemical fertilizers are also bad for the soil. So you can state any of these four on the test when you encounter these types of questions. Just know generally what the soil wants to retain, wants to contain, and why it is important. Okay, so let's try this question next. Okay, and you guys can answer. So the proper way of maintaining soil structure and fertility is termed as soil what?
A.
Yeah, that is right. The answer is A. So Well, it's called conservation, of course, is because it's the beneficial word. It's a good word. It's about maintaining the soil structure. All of these other ones is opposite or not related. So depletion is about not maintaining. It's not really profile. It's not related. Erosion is also a negative. So conservation is the correct word to use here. Okay. Yeah, soil conservation refers to the proper management and practices used to maintain soil structure and fertility that prevents degradation, such as erosion or depletion. So, erosion and depletion are what's being protected by conservation. Let's look at this next question. So, the following effects are as a result of soil erosion, except what? So saying what is not a result of soil erosion. What do you think? Yeah, let's read this definition of soil erosion. So you might be wondering, yeah, let's look at, we have maybe a couple options for A. I think some people said A, some people said D. Uh, yeah, let's look at these answer choices in just a little bit. But let me read what's the soil erosion. So, soil erosion is when the top layer of soil, called the topsoil, is washed away or removed by wind, water, or ice, or by human activities. So, it can be, naturally occurring. So it can be eroded, meaning washed or removed. So it's like when you have a big rock at first, then by, wind and by water, wind and by water, it erodes away. So it is being washed away or removed. So after that, the rock looks like this because it is eroded. And this in the context of soil, the topsoil is important because it contains nutrients that support plant growth. So when the topsoil is lost, then the land can become less fertile and more prone to flooding and desertification, meaning drying up. So that is why increasing bushfires is important. So that is why A is the answer for this one. So yeah, whoever said A, that's correct. Because increasing bushfires is not a result of soil erosion. Soil erosion is just about washing away or removing the top layer of soil. And bushfires is not caused by soil erosion. But next, it's not the result of soil erosion. But the next options are definitely a result of soil erosion. Things like weakening support of plants. Yeah, that's right. That can be a result of soil erosion. The loss of important minerals to plants is a result of soil erosion. And weakening of support of buildings is also a result of soil erosion because it'll have a less stable topsoil, remember, and a very weak base and support for buildings. Yeah, that is why the answer is A for this question. So do you
Okay.
understand why A is the correct answer?
Yes.
Okay. So bushfires are not related to soil erosion at all because soil erosion is just about removing and washing away the topsoil, and bushfire is caused by fires and not really by wind, water, or ice. So that is why A is the correct answer. So yeah, this is the soil erosion that we've talked about. So you can see that the top layer of soil, what's supposed to be here, is being eroded off. So it's being all eroded off by wind and water, or farming, or construction, or deforestation. So what results is that it might look like this over here, and it might also look like this in a severe case. So all of these are results of the losing of topsoil and a soil erosion. So here are also some examples of controlling soil erosions because we want to prevent soil erosion, right? So you can prevent soil erosion by planting trees. It's called reforestation or afforestation. You can also cover crops that are on top and therefore protecting the topsoil, or mulching, or crop rotation, or terracing, contour plowing, erosion control blankets. And all of these are really materials and methods that prevent the topsoil from eroding. So mulching here is covering of the soil surface. Again, it's about covering it. So it helps to prevent soil erosion. What I mean by contour plowing here, it means to build a structure that helps prevent erosion from heavy rains. And terracing too helps prevent erosion from heavy rains on steep hills by making it this structure here. So all of these are examples of methods of controlling soil erosion. So you can do all of these to prevent soil erosion. Yeah, let's move on to this next question. Soil depletion is not caused by what? Soil depletion means just the loss of soil. Yeah, this one is simple. The answer is B. So if you said B, then that's correct. Remember what afforestation means.
It's planned out.
Yeah, right. It's about planting trees. Afforestation means planting trees, planting more trees. So planting large numbers of trees on land actually is good for the soil. It does not cause soil depletion. But uh, yeah. So erosion is when topsoil is washed away. So the topsoil is being lost. So it is called a soil depletion. It is a part of soil depletion. Leaching is when water washes away nutrients from the soil and carries them deep into the ground. So leaching can cause soil depletion this way when the nutrients from the soil is being carried deep underground like this. You can see in the picture as well. And of course, illegal mining can in part cause soil depletion because when doing mining, what we're doing is we're extracting precious metals or rocks, well, without permission for illegal cases. But what you're doing by mining is you're removing the soil. You have to remove the soil to get the metals and the rocks. That's why the answer is B. Okay, let's move on to this question. State the three effects of soil erosion on the growth of crop plants. So, can you guys list three effects of? Yeah, we did do some, examples. Um, but soil erosion, we've only talked about the loss of topsoil. So if you said loss of topsoil, then yeah, that's right. That's what we've been talking about so far. But there can be other consequences and effects of soil erosion. Other effects include less water in the soil. Of course. When soil is eroded, it cannot hold the water well, right? So the plants dry out easily and do not grow properly. Soil erosion can also cause poor root growth. So soil erosion makes the soil thin or hard, and roots cannot grow deep, so the plants become very weak. And if the soil is not, it's very hard for the roots to go through, then it may easily fall over. The trees might easily fall over. Okay, looking at the next question. Mention one method of controlling soil erosion.
Forestation.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You said plantation, and that is definitely correct. Yeah, planting trees helps control soil erosion, but all of these other things as well. So terracing, mulching, contour plowing, crop rotation, cover crops, all of those here, things that we've talked about in this previous slide can help prevent soil erosion. So you can list any of these. And plantation or planting trees is definitely one method. Okay, let's move on to this question. Contour plowing is normally practiced on what land?
B,
Oh,
B.
did you say D? Yeah, I think I heard D. And if you said D, yeah, that's correct. Because contour plowing is a farming method of plowing on the hills. So you can see these steps that are occurring in the contour plowing. It's called contour plowing because you're sloping the land along the contour lines across the slope. So you're kind of drawing out a step by step farming land, and that is called a contour plowing. It is helpful because it reduces soil erosion, it conserves water better, and it helps improve crop production. And again, reviewing plowing, what means by plowing means turning and loosening the soil using a plow to prepare the land for planting crops. So, in the context of contour plowing, it is a method that is used to prepare the planting crops. And the contour part makes it suitable for plowing on hills or slopey lands. So, slopey lands best matches like a hill environment. So that is why the answer is D. Remember that. Remember about the contour plowing that it occurs on the slopey lands. Okay. We can move on to this question. The following practices are cultural practices in crop production, except what do you think? Yeah, you can read over the text here. This is like an information text. So please read over this, and this give you a hint on what the right answer is. Or-
A.
Yeah, if you said A, then that's correct. It's about nursing. So it says following practices are cultural practices in crop production, except part. Nursing is not really a cultural practice in crop production, because nursing refers to the practice of raising young plants. So that's the important part. And young plants, of course, are called seedlings. And it refers to the practice of raising these young plants in nursery before transplanting them to the main farm or field. So nursing is a pre-planting activity. So before they become an adult plant and grow well, the younger plants are in the nursery beds, yeah, before they're transplanted to maybe another farm. So, although all of these really are, all of these options, A, B, C, and D, are practices used to grow crops, um, nursing, it specifically refers to raising young plants Then say these other options, which can be used to control all types of plants. So, yeah, pest control, mulching, and weeding are practices that are used, but no nursing is a pre-planting activity. Again, so pest control, mulching, weeding are cultural practices in crop production, but nursing is what is called a pre-planting activity. So that is why the answer is A for this one. Yeah, so mulching, our previous option, is the practice of covering the soil surface with materials like leaves, straw, and strains soil moisture to prevent weed growth. And we've talked about this already being helpful in soil water retention and nutrient retention. That is good for mulching. Weeding is the process of removing unwanted plants or weeds from a farm. So you're pulling out the weeds. And crop rotation is the practice of growing different types of crops in the same field in a planned sequence over time. So you plant different types of crops in different seasons, and that is a good strategy, because different types of plants grow best in different seasons. So looking at other options, earthing up means piling soil around the base of a plant, like yam or potato. There are also options like gap filling in, so planting new crops in areas where plants died. It's also pricking out, means separating seedlings and transferring them to their own spot. And these are all cultural practices in crop production. So, yeah, ones before that too. Let me go over all of these. So, mulching, weeding, crop rotation, pruning, earthing up, gap filling in, and pricking out are all examples of cultural practices of crop production. The practices, let's look at this question. The practice that excess branches of growing plants are removed is termed what?
B.
Yeah, if you said B, yeah, that's correct. It's called pruning. So pruning is the practice of cutting off, you can see in this picture, This person is cutting off this excess branch, and that helps to improve the plant's health, shape, and productivity. So let's look at this question. The practice of reducing the number of seedlings per stand for better growth is known as what?
B,
Yeah, did you say D on thinning out? Yeah, if you
B,
said D, then yeah, that's correct. Because here we can go back to the previous slides too, but thinning out is the practice of removing excess seedlings from a planting spot so that it's specifically about seedlings, removing excess seedlings from a planting spot so that the remaining ones have enough space, nutrients, sunlight, and water to grow well. Yeah, so thinning out. This is thinning out, the practice of removing excess seedlings, taking out the seedlings. Okay, let's look at this question. Stirring of soil on vegetable beds is to do what, do you think? Why do we do that? Stirring the soil. Do you think it improves aeration of soil? Um, yes or no? Do you think?
B, D,
Yeah, if you said B, and that's correct. Let's look at the reason why. So, like I was saying, let's look at individual options. So, number one, improving aeration of the soil. Yes, that's correct. That is the purpose of stirring of soil. So here it matches this option here. Number three, if we look at number three, increase water penetration into soil. Yeah, it's correct because the purpose of stirring a soil enhances water absorption. So by increasing water penetration, then water can enter into the soil better. Number four is about reducing weed growth. And yeah, definitely. It does control the weeds because by stirring or mixing the soil, then the weeds will be pulled out and nutrients will be mixed together. So there are other purposes of stirring the soil, such as making a healthy root growth. So mix fertilizer and prepare the soil for planting. So yeah, number two is not correct because it's not about increasing activities of soil organisms. So just by mixing and stirring the soil, we cannot control the activities of soil organisms. So, although the stirring of soil can inhibit the activity, can actually not increase, but reduce the activities of soil organisms, it does not increase their activities. So the answer is B, which has 1, 3, and 4 only. Let's look at this question. Which of the following activities are cultural practices in vegetable production? Yeah, let's look at these options. So, applying a fertilizer, do you think that is a cultural practice? Yes, right? Yes. One is right. Yes. So, harvesting, do you think harvesting is cultural practice?
Yes.
Yes, right? Yeah. So, one and two. What about three? Mulching. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, right? So, the answer is
D.
yes, that's correct. That is why the answer is D, because all of these are practices, cultural practices in vegetable production that helps the growth of these vegetables. So you can apply the fertilizers, you can harvest them, you can practice mulching, covering the top, all to increase the vegetable production. That is why the answer is D. Okay, now we're looking at the principles of crop production practices. So, all of these are sort of ways that we do crop production practices. So, I'll read through each one of these, and I hope you're able to know why these are some of the crop production practices. Of course, first, there is land or soil preparation. So you need to prepare the land well before planting any sort of crops. Next, second step is about soil sampling and analysis. This is important because we need to know what type of soil is there. We need to analyze the soil type. Next step is seed selection and planting. We need to select which seeds are best for that type of soil that has been analyzed. And after that, we have the irrigation installation and managements. So we need to properly manage, the farming and the water systems that are in the farmlands. Of course, we can apply fertilizers, can spray fertilizers. That's part of the crop production practices. We, of course, the farmers do weed control. They pick out the unnecessary weeds, and there are pest and disease control. There are crop harvesting, and post-harvesting handlings. And of course, the farmers need to keep the records and analyze the amount of crops collected each year. And all of these are crop production practices that we perform for better knowledge of the crops that leads to a better yield of crop production. Okay. So let's look at this question. The farming system that makes the most effective use of land is called what, do you think? What is the most effective use of the land called? Yeah, maybe you said B, or I heard some A's as well. But the answer here is D. It's mixed farming. So maybe some of you said A, crop rotation. Crop rotation is about growing different crops in a specific order year by year. So you can grow the corns first, and then carrots, and then peas and lettuces. Option B was called land rotation. Land rotation means leaving a piece of land to rest and move on to a new one. So this option is very inefficient because you're leaving the land to rest, so that might take a lot of time. And you need a lot of land as a consequence. So when you move on to a new land, then that other land that was previously used to crop is useless. So that's why it's ineffective. Option C was mixed cropping. This is when two or more crops are grown together, are grown simultaneously on the same land. But that's not necessarily the most effective way to use the land. The actual most effective way to use the land is the mixed farming, where crops are grown and animals are raised on the same farm. So there are both benefits to this farming. Crop residues, what's left of the crops, can be used as animal feed, and animal manure, from the other side, can improve soil fertility for the crops. So that is why it is the best and most effective way, because we're finding the most effective use of land in the question. And animals and crops help together, and because they're together, they are the most effective. They can be grown together. That's why the answer is D, mixed farming. Okay. So let's look at this slide. Explain briefly how each of the following farming systems are practiced. So we've talked about organic farming, and we're just talking about this. Mixed farming, mixed cropping. So let's find out what these are. So what is organic farming? What is organic farming? So, organic farming is the practice of growing crops and raising animals without synthetic fertilizers. Synthetic fertilizers means just human-made or built fertilizers. It's like man-made fertilizers. And other things like pesticides, herbicides, or genetically modified organisms, while maintaining soil fertility through natural method. So organic, you can think of the word organic as being natural methods. It's not using fertilizers, herbicides, or genetically modified methods. Next, we have mixed farming. So mixed. So the farmer grows crops and raises animals at the same time. So that's what we've been talking about. This mixed farming. You grow crops and animals together. Finally, there is mixed cropping. So it's just talking about the cropping here, which means the practice of growing two or more different crops on the same piece of land at the same time. So you can grow maize and beans together, and that will also be pretty effective in growing both at the same time. So that is mixed cropping versus the mixed farming. Okay, yeah, does this make sense to everyone? Um,
Yes.
okay. And always feel free to ask me questions in between if you have. Okay. Yeah, then let's move on to the next slide. Okay. A farming system which involves the growing of rice and the rearing of fowls is known as what? Fowls means poultry birds like chickens, turkeys, geese, and ducks. All of those are fowls.
C. C.
Um,
C.
did you say C for this one?
C.
Mm.
C.
So, what farming method grows animals and crops at the same time?
Mixed farming.
Yeah, right. It's mixed farming, right? Mixed farming.
Yeah.
The answer is B. Yeah, a great job. Because we're growing rice and the rearing of fowls, the fowls are like chickens, turkeys, geese. Since we're raising both crops and animals, it's called a mixed farming. Yeah, let's move on. What about this one? The practice of growing cowpea and maize on the same piece of land at the same time is known as what?
Mixed farming.
Yeah,
C.
yeah,
Mixed farming.
mixed farming. Yeah, great job. So mixed farming is A, right? So yeah, but here, sorry, mixed cropping. Sorry, that was the previous question for mixed farming. But here, notice that here we're growing cowpea and maize on the same piece of land. So this is not really about farming because mixed farming is raising crops and animals at the same time. But since cowpea and maize are both crops, so raising crops and crops on the same land, two different crops. And this is called the mixed cropping. Remember? It's when growing two or more different crops on the same land. Yeah. So before it was mixed farming, but now we're mixed cropping. So that's why the answer is B for this case. Yeah. Do you understand why it's mixed cropping?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. That's why it's mixed cropping, not mixed farming. So yeah. Mixed farming is crops and animals on the same land. Remember, land rotation is about moving to a new land. It's not related to this at all. Crop rotation is growing different crops year by year or by season. But in this case, we're growing two crops at the same time, which is mixed cropping. Okay, let's look at the crop rotation in more detail. So remember that we have defined crop rotation to be growing different crops at different parts of the year. So the order of crop rotation is typically legumes, leaf, fruit, and root. Uh, legumes, leaf, fruit, and roots. Is this is just a general example, and it is not strict. So this order is what the crop rotation generally or broadly follows. So the order, remember, is legumes first. So legumes has to come first because it sets up the nutrients necessary to plant the leaves. So legumes comes first. Remember that. And legumes are things like cowpeas and beans. So they're the ones that fix the nitrogen and enrich the soil. And then the leaves come. The second are the leaves, like cabbages and lettuces. So leaves used the nitrogen and the nutrients that are made by the legumes. So it's important that legumes comes before leaves, fruits, and roots. And after the leaves, there comes the fruits, things like tomatoes, bananas, etc. And they use potassiums to grow, mostly. And then after that, there comes the roots. These are the last part of the crop rotation cycle. They are things like cassava and potatoes, and also carrots, because they grow under the roots of the plant. And roots are important because they break up the hard soil, and they also, in part, makes the soil quality and structure better for the legumes to come again in the cycle. Okay, let's move on to, yeah, this classic example of the 4-year rotation. So the first year, we plant the legumes. They're called the fixers. We plant peas and beans. And, we learned that they help by adding nitrogen to the soil, like a natural fertilizer. So they are the ones that help the soil make the soil quality better in the first year. In the second year, there comes the leafy greens. They're also called the eaters because they eat or take the nitrogens made by the legumes. So examples are things like cabbages, spinach, lettuce, So yeah, they use up the nitrogen. And year three comes the fruit crops. It's like tomatoes, peppers. They focus on flowers and fruits, instead of just taking the nutrients in the soil. And they use different nutrients like potassium as well. And finally, year number four, here comes the root vegetables, or they're called the diggers. They're plants like carrots, potatoes, and cassavas, and their deep roots soften the soil, and it helps continue on the cycle. So next year, we'll plant the legumes again, and then the cycle continues. So one more clarifying is that legumes are the fixers. They add nitrogen and nutrients to the soil. That's the most important part that you should be taking away from this. Okay. Okay. So you have been given this question. Maize, cowpea, cassava, and cabbage. Let's actually try this yourself without an example. Yeah, I think this will be better. So you have been given maize, cowpea, cassava, and cabbage to cultivate on a piece of land using the crop rotation system. Can you design a 4-year rotational program using the crops? Using maize, cowpea, cassava, and cabbage?
Yeah, one.
Yeah, year one.
How
Yeah, cowpea. I think I heard cowpea, and that is right. Why?
yeah,
Because, yeah, cowpeas are legumes, right? They are
yeah,
legumes. Yeah. Year two.
cabbage.
Yes, there comes the leaves, right? The leaves. After the legumes are the leaves. So cabbage, that's correct. Year three. What comes?
Salad. Beans.
So, yeah, we have maize and cassava left, but maize would be a better option because of what comes next in year four, which is cassava, finally. Okay. Yes. Because cassavas are parts of the root, right? And maize, I guess part of it is part of the fruit, but it's also a little bit part of the leafy. So fruit and leafy can kind of interchange a little bit. But what's important that is that we set up cowpeas in year one because they fix the nitrogens and make the soil better. They're legumes. And number four, year four, we have cassavas because they're the root veggies, which helps soften the roots, which helps soften the soil. Okay. So number two asks to, oops, to give two reasons for the sequences given in A. So this number one. So we have already looked at, legumes. We put legumes Legumes, number one, because they fix nitrogen and enrich the soil. We put cabbage and maize in the middle because they're the heavy feeders. They require the most amount of nutrients, so we have to put them after the cowpeas, after the nitrogen has been fixed. Well after the legumes. Finally, we put the root veggies at the end, year four, because their deep roots soften the soil and it helps prepare for the next cycle by the legumes. Okay, does everyone understand this crop cycle? Yes. Okay, great. So again, this was the example. And yeah, let's move on to this part B. So figure 1B okay, is an illustration of two types of farming systems practiced in Ghana labeled K and L. So this is like a theory question, so it might be a little bit difficult, but let's try this. So we have two farming systems, K on the left and L on the right. System K represents four farmlands labeled A, B, C, and D, and the arrows indicate movement of the farmer over a period of time as shown. So year one, the farmer is at farm A. At year four, the farmer is at B. Year C, the farmer is at plantation C. And year 10, the farmer is on D again. And in system L on the right represents the farmland divided into four plots. A single farmland divided into four plots. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the arrows indicate the movement of crops cultivated over the period. So this might be a little bit difficult, but can you guys name each of the farming system? What type of farming systems are K and L, do you think?
K is crop rotation and L is
Yeah.
K, K is crop rotation.
Mhm.
L is land rotation.
Yeah, so K, yeah, you're really, really close. So K is called land rotation. So what they tried to specify is that farmer has to move across different lands in year. And what was land rotation again? Let me go back to this other slide. Um,
Oh God. I know. You know,
mm,
if I look
land
like
rotation was most effective. Mm, yeah, here. So we talked about land rotation here, right? Land rotation is leaving a piece of land to rest and moving on to a new one. So we can see that the farmer is doing that here. The farmer is leaving a piece of land, A, and just moving on to a different crop land, this B here. And we're leaving the A behind for the crops to die and settle better. And then after some time, the farmer moves to plantation C, this farm C, and then moves to farm D. So it is about moving between lands. So that's why it's called a land rotation. But L, the system L, is the same farmland that is divided into four plots. And you see that the movement of the crops cultivated over the period can be shown by the arrows. So these different types of crops that are on the different plots are cultivated at different times of the year. So that is why this is the crop rotation, because it occurs in the same land and crops are cultivated over the different period. I hope this makes sense to everyone. So does anyone have any questions about this or about anything that we've talked about today? Yeah, go ahead.
No.
No
No.
question? Okay, yeah.
Yes. Understand.
Mm, so yeah, this was the last slide for today. Um, let's see. Sorry, there was this one last slide for today. It was this one. Okay. This was the last part of the theory question. Okay. Number two states to give the reason for each of the names given in one. So we've already talked about this already. So K is land rotation because the farmer moves from one farmland to another. So you're rotating the land. And L is crop rotation because the farmer rotates the crops from one plot to another. But then that plot is the same plot. So the farmer is not moving from one farmland to another. The farmer is just rotating the crops in the same field. Okay. So number three, state two ways in which the farming system K is of importance to the farmer. So why do you think K is important to the farmer exactly? So let's see what this says. So the reason why we use K, the farmers use K, the land rotation, is although it's not really efficient because you're leaving a lot of farmlands empty and you need a lot of land to cultivate the crops, it prevents soil nutrition depletion. So once you use a lot of different lands, then you're not depleting the nutrients because other areas have new amounts of nutrients. You'll never really run out. And it also reduces pests and diseases. It also improves soil fertility, and it is for better harvest as well because it increases the amount of crop yields. So using more farmlands would have more areas to grow all different types of crops instead of just focusing on one. So, although there are all of these benefits of land rotation, but it's not encouraged because it's very inefficient because we're using so much land and we're gaining, although a lot of yield, we're leaving a lot of these lands empty and, in a sense, wasting them. So it's not the most efficient and preferred method of farming. So it's not a preferred method for the land rotation. So that is one reason why that crop rotation might be better. So here it says number four actually says to give three reasons why K is not encouraged. So the problem can be that wasted land is not producing enough funds during the fallow periods. And number two, land is getting scarce, of course. We don't have infinite amount of land. There's limited amount of farmlands. So that's why land rotation is not preferred or not encouraged currently. And number three, it can also expand farmland into forests, and that might cause deforestation. You have to cut down more trees in order to increase the amount of farmlands, which is not good for the environment. So this is the reason why the crop rotation method is the better method. And number five actually states to name one type of crop that could be included in farmland L, the crop rotation, to improve the fertility of the soil. And you can use that by uh, all the methods that we've talked about before, things like legume crops and clover crops. And legumes are, in a sense, more important to plant in these crop rotation cycles because, again, they produce, they produce and fix nitrogen. So it increases the fertility of the land. So that's why legume crops are important in these crop rotation plantations. Okay, so this was the last slide for today. Um, and next week, if you don't have any questions, um, we will meet to finish up the rest of the agriculture slides and then move on to mathematics. So, yeah, do you have any other questions for today? Yeah, if you don't have any questions, then I'll see everyone next week then. Okay, yeah, thank you everyone for listening. And yeah, see you next week. Bye, everyone. Yeah, you're welcome. Bye. Bye, everyone.